So this is good, but we've kind of mucked up our front.php file. Plus, in the interest of object orientation, these two listeners could really belong in their own classes, and that would make them much more reusable. So in this next step, what we'll do is create classes for these listeners. By now, this is probably an exercise that you could execute yourself without any help, so feel free to give it a try and then come back to the videos and see if you got it right. Let's begin. I'm going to go back to our resource pack directory, and I'm going to open up step 51, which is Google Listener.php, moving listener into its own class. I'm actually going to copy this, and let's paste it inside of our base directory. I'm going to jump up to our examples folder, expand our source folder, and paste this in. And I'm going to rename it Google Listener.php. There will be instructions in just a moment on where to put these, but we could also figure it out by looking at the namespace inside of the file. Okay, I'm going to go back to the resource pack directory, and I will copy the 52nd step, content length listener.php, moving listener into its own class. Copy this, and then paste it over in the root directory of our examples, and rename this content length listener.php. All right. Now let's go back to the resource pack, and let's set up our front.php file to use the new listener classes instead of embedding the functionality in anonymous functions. So I'll open up step 53, and I'll copy this code and paste it over the code in our front.php file and save it. Okay, so now we're back to something a little bit more rational when it comes to our front.php file. Earlier, we talked about the benefit of having a very condensed front.php file. Since this is our front controller, it would make it very easy to create additional front controllers without duplicating a lot of code. Now you might find as you evolve an application that you're kind of just sticking code wherever it works to begin with, and that makes a lot of sense. But it always pays off to take a minute to think about where that code actually belongs, and if there's a place for it where you could reuse it with future projects more easily instead of embedding functionality into procedural code. Okay, let's compare this front.php file with our last front.php file. So that's going to be step 50. I'm going to drag these over to our comparison tool. So you can see we've taken these two addListener functions and condensed them to a single lines. And instead of passing an anonymous function, we're passing a different callback structure, which is an array that includes first an instance of a class, and in this case it's going to be content length listener, and then the second parameter is the method that we're going to call within that class. The final parameter here is our priority. In this second line, we're adding our Google listener. Again, we have the name of the event, and then we're passing a valid callback. Before we used an anonymous function, we could also use a function name. In this case, what we're doing is using a method, and in order to use a method, we have to specify an instance to use and the name of the method. So we have new simplex Google listener and onResponse. So we just created these two files, and if we take a look, we should expect to see onResponse on both of them. Before we open them up though, let's go back to our resource pack directory and open up step 54, which is instructions on moving the event listener files. So we're just going to move both of them into our source/simplex folder. So I'm going to jump back to our examples folder, and I'll copy content length listener and Google listener, and I'll drag them over to our simplex folder.